our very first hybrid SASA storytelling night this Wednesday night, May the 3rd, and we are so excited, mainly because we actually have live tellers right here at Oak Print Flooring in San Antonio, Texas, but we also have a handful of Zoomers out there, and we are elated. And hopefully, if all this goes smoothly, we'll actually be able to gather more people as we meet here once a month, the very first Wednesday of each month. But without further ado, I would like to introduce to you the owner and the most generous, gracious man who actually is allowing us to meet here in this room once a month. It's a beautiful community room for the city of San Antonio. And we are excited to have Sam O'Krent join us. And he's here just to say a few words. Sam, take it away.
Okay. Hi, everybody. There's the camera. Hi. And welcome. And I am one of the owners. Susan's daughter, my wife, my partner, who's not here right now. But the two of us, Margie and I, welcome y'all here. We're so excited to have you here. Susan and Charlie have told us for years all about y'all, and we're excited to have you here. And there's got to be a story behind that somewhere, right? So welcome. Look forward to hosting y'all every the first Wednesday of every month. So whatever we can do to help you out. And by the way, flooring is always on sale. So there's always, you just mentioned San Antonio Storytellers. We got a special family discount. Beautiful.
Oh, thank you so much,
Charlie.
So, oh, I know, I love that.
Y'all have a great evening.
Thank you so much, Sam.
Have fun, Zoomers.
Yes. Oh, that was wonderful. So yes, we'll be meeting here. It's always going to be on a Wednesday, but this time it's starting at 6:30, and then we'll try to go until 8. We do have some fabulous tellers here, and we took a picture, so we will be sharing the picture on Facebook also. I'd like to thank Karen Archer, who is also assisting us tonight with our very first hybrid, along with my husband, Chuck Kuntz, who's right next door to me, and he'll be taking pictures. You can see his hand in my photo. But while he's doing that, I'm going to introduce to you Mary Grace Kettner. She'll be our very first teller who will be sharing a tale with us that I think you guys will really get to enjoy, especially me. It's very special, and I think we'll all learn a little bit about a very special man. And here too, or two, that's right. Mary Grace, you have the stage.
Thank you. I wanted to tell you a story about my dad and some of the folks that he met when he was younger, whose lives he followed. One of them was Liz Carpenter. Now, you may have heard her name before. She was Lady Bird Johnson's press secretary, but she went to Austin High School. She was a couple of years ahead of my dad. And my dad thought she was just the prettiest and smartest girl he had ever seen. But when he would say that, he would always say, but she probably didn't even notice me because I was just a country boy. So a few years ago at the Texas Storytelling Festival, we invited Liz Carpenter to come and put on a special program for us. And she had just written a book, and someone interviewed her. Do you remember? I mean, do you not remember? We didn't ask her to prepare a really speech, but she was interviewed, and of course she told stories all along the way of her life and things that had happened to her, and they're all funny. She's a funny character. So afterwards, we had an opportunity to get her book and get it signed. And I waited in what was a long line to get it signed. And when I got up to her, I said, I want you to sign this to my dad, Johnny Klingham. He was in high school with you. He was a couple of years behind you, but he just really admired you. And he would always say she probably didn't even know me because I was just a country boy. And then I added, but I'll tell you what, if he was just a country boy, he was a good looking country boy.
Yeah.
So she smiled and she signed the book, and I stepped off to the side and I opened it up to see what she had said. And she had written it to Johnny, the good looking country boy whom I remember.
Oh.
So I could hardly wait, of course, to take it up to him. And it was just a week or two after the storytelling festival. I drove up to Kerrville and I gave him the book and the bag with the book in it. And he had some friends visiting. And so I said, I was explaining to them that my dad went to school with Liz Carpenter, and he really admired her. And he would always say, though, but she probably didn't know me. She wouldn't remember me because I was just a country boy and 2 years younger than her. And as soon as I said that, my dad said, well, she did too. She said so right here. I just can't imagine anything sweeter than both of those two little incidents. Another person he grew up with was John Henry Falk. His family had a farm on Onion Creek, and so did John Henry Falk's family. Falk was about a decade older than my dad. So when my dad was in elementary school, he was a teenager. And my dad thought that he was funny and kind of a smart aleck. I don't know if you remember John Henry Falk. He was on Hee Haw in the 70s. You don't remember him, Tyler, but some of us might remember him. And he had a radio show long before that, before television was popular. He had a radio program. He had some bit parts in little movies and those kinds of things. And an awful thing happened to him that was happening to a lot of movie stars and performers at that time. He was identified or called by Joseph McCarthy, Senator Joseph McCarthy, who's called out as being a communist, and he was blacklisted, so he couldn't get a job in the field that he loved most. And he took the case to court. He sued the group that Senator McCarthy was sort of representing. And the case went on and on for about 5 years, from the late 50s into the early 60s. He finally won, and he won the largest amount that had ever been granted in a civil suit at that time, a couple of $1 million. And of course, after 5 years of not working and paying lawyers, or promising to pay lawyers, I guess, and court costs and those kinds of things, he never saw much of that money. I remembered something else just now. If you have heard John Henry Falk tell a story, it was probably on Christmas Eve on National Public Radio. Every year they replay his Christmas story that he told, I think, the first year that NPR was founded. He told to him. It's a wonderful, tender, warm story. So if you haven't heard it before, Jane has. Listen this Christmas Eve. He told also at the Texas Folklife Festival during the 70s and 80s. He told at the Texas Storytelling Festival during the late 80s. He died about 1990, somewhere right in there. And I had another opportunity to see if I'm not a big women's auxiliary person. I don't know if they even have them anymore. I think nobody is. But 1 year, well, actually every year for a while, I was invited to join the Wives Auxiliary of the CPAs. And I never joined until 1 year when they sent out the program schedule and John Henry Falk was to be a speaker. So I got to hear him there too and meet him and talk with him for a little while. Just to give you an idea of his style, I guess, I'd like to tell you one of his stories. You never knew if the characters he was telling you about were real or if he had made them up. And you kind of suspected it was a sort of a blend of those two. One time he told about going out to see Miss Fanny Rollins. He drove up to her house and looked, and she was sitting there on the porch. He said she was a capacious woman. Her bosoms went all the way around to her back. He said, I rolled down the window and I called out to her. I said, I'm looking for Miss Fanny Rollins. And she says to him, well, if you can't see her, you better get yourself to an eye doctor. I've been accused of a heap of things, but being invisible never was one of them. So he could tell she was a genial soul. We went on up to the porch and sat in the rocking chair that she offered him. And she said, Miss Rollins, I come to ask you, what is it that's going on in Texas politically these days? And she said, funny thing, you should ask me that. My nephew Gervis was just here. You know Gervis, he's that one's got that, he comes from Cedar Valley. He's got that 1972 pickup and a double hernia. And he and his wife Eloise, they was just here, and when they got married, you know, then he took his he took his honeymoon in Mexico by itself. But they was just here, and Eloise Magnus, that's his wife's name. She's from Lockhart. Her dad is Jim Magnus over there. He runs that cotton gin. I say he runs it. He did run it until about 11:30 one Tuesday morning during cotton season. Fell into the machinery. It was going off full tilt. Chipped himself into a bale of long staple cotton. Went in about 6'3", come out about 8 inches long. Had every undertaker in that part of Texas gathering around trying to figure out how to extract the remains, and they gave all the pros and cons and had an election, and they voted him more of a stain than a corpse. Said that family would save money on the funeral if they just went ahead and buried him in the bale. So we don't get many of those around here, cotton bale funerals. And when they sent out the word they was having one, so many people wanted to come, they had to hold up the funeral for 3 days. And that's where they made their mistake, you see, because that third day, cotton tripled in price. They didn't save a penny on that funeral.
Oh, gosh.
Well, then John Henry Fogg had many, many more stories like that. But another thing that happened, I guess, on behalf of him, is that the Texas Storytelling Festival named their highest award after John Henry Fogg. It's called the John Henry Fogg Award. And it's given to the person who has done the most for storytelling, recognized in that year, at least. And as you may have heard last month, the recipient of this year's, the 2023 John Henry Fogg Award was your friend and mine, Sue Coons. So I thank you for letting me share some fond memories of my dad and Liz Carpenter and John Henry Fogg.
Bravo. That was amazing, Mary Grace. Thank you so much. And as you can see out there in Zoom land, that we have participants sitting behind me and actually in front of me. There they are. There's Tyler and his dad. Oh my goodness, there's Veronica. We've got a lot of folks here. Jane is across from me, and Mary and Blue, and Susan Whipple, and a fellow that just walked in. I'm so glad you're here.
You got here and kept going around and round on the street.
Oh, no worries. We're glad you found us.
Thank you.
And hopefully now that you know where we're at, this is where we'll be. And oh, hi, how are you doing? Can y'all say your names really quick? My name is Bonnie. You're Bonnie, I'm so glad you're Bonnie. Are you a storyteller or you'd like to come here to listen?
I like to listen.
Yeah.
But I like to be a storyteller.
Perfect.
Okay.
And you, sir?
Yes, my first, I'm sorry, sometimes start. My first name is Gary. Gary. Gary, G-A-R-Y.
Oh, Gary. Gotcha.
Gary.
Very cool, Gary. Nice to meet you. And what was your name?
Bonnie.
Bonnie. So there we go. So,
Behind you is another gender.
and I'm sorry.
Behind you is another gender that came in.
Oh, yes. Hello. What is your name, sir?
My name is Lance Freeman. I attended back at the library days.
I
remember.
remember.
And I'm still a little hesitant. I want to be a storyteller, but I love listening. And so
We're
the
so,
stories are percolating. That's what I think.
and that's a perfect word, percolating. I love it. And there's Mary Grace and there's Chuck. So I think I've got just about everybody. So there we go. Our next teller is going to be Mary Ann Blue. Mary Ann is a busy gal too. She's very much involved with the Texas Folklore Society, our Tejas Storytelling Association, and of course, she is a board member of, thank goodness, of our very own San Antonio Storytellers. She is amazing and she has an amazing story to tell. So without further ado, how about a hand from Mary Ann Blue?
Gary to move something.
Yes, Gary, would you mind moving
Bye.
your chair over this way?
There we go.
There you go. There's we have a projector that's projecting out. Yeah, there you go.
Okay, so. I'm gonna do something a little bit different tonight. This last week in Waco, they opened the rebuilt, refurbished, reconstructed suspension bridge that was built in 1870 that was built for them to bring the cattle on the Chisholm Trail to cross the Brazos River in Waco. It's been closed for renovation and restoration, and they reopened it this week. Every time I cross the Brazos, and those of you who know much about Texas geography may know, the Brazos is a long river, and you can cross it a gazillion times going east-west. When I cross the Brazos, I always think of my great-great-grandfather, Billy Bishop. Billy was born in 1842, and by the time he was 19, the Civil War had started, and he signed up with the Mississippi 13th Regiment. Billy was always known kind of as somebody who had the wanderlust, and he spent all of the Civil War away from home. But we have a couple of his letters, and I'm going to read one of them to you tonight. This was written in 1863 in Fredericksburg, Virginia. Dear Mother, I received a letter by Tom and was pleased to hear from you. Well, I'm in good health and getting along as well as ever. Tom was taken with the chill this morning and has been very sick today, but I hope that he'll be better in the morning. We were all so glad to see him and get the news from home, and very thankful to you for sending the butter. Oh, it was quite a treat for us, as provisions have been very scarce. And we have been getting along finely since we got the things from Tom. We are all thinking about peace now, and nothing else is the talk. Some of the boys think that it'll be over in about 60 days. Now remember, the date on this was March 1863. Some of the boys think it'll be over in about 60 days, but I don't know what to think. I would be the proudest boy in the country if this was true, but I'm awful afraid that it's not so. But I cannot help thinking that there is something in it that, that when everybody is talking about peace, maybe it'll happen. I cannot help thinking of it myself, and I would give anything if we could have peace. To be back home with you and somebody else, you know who. It would be better than anything in the world to be, well, to have this unholy war at a close. Jim and Dick and myself have all made a contract to quit swearing and also get rid of all our old bad habits. And I think that we will comply with all that we've said. A man might as well do right as wrong, and we all know the difference between the two. I think if we all stand up for what we have said, that we'll have the best mess in this company. And I think we will stand up to it. I, for one, will do all I can. Well, there is nothing new to report in this part of the Army. The Yankees were up in their hot air balloons every day looking down on us. But I don't think there will be any more fighting here for some. The Army are all leaving on the opposite side of the river, and a good many of our Army are leaving for South Carolina, as that is the place where they think the next fighting will be. I don't think that there will ever be another fight at this place, for I'm confident that General Lee would whip the Yankee Army here, and if ever they attempt to cross this river, they'll get a whipping like they never had before. You should see this town. I don't think there's a house in this town that hasn't been hit by a cannonball. Well, as it's getting late and I have to go on guard directly, I'll come to a close. Jim Yates sends his love to you and all the rest of the relatives at home. Billy Mack and Dick send their respects to you all. Ever your affectionate son, Lieutenant W.R. Bishop, Company F, 13th Mississippi Regiment. P.S. Give my love to Jenny Mack when you see her. Well, Billy Bishop survived the Civil War. He went home and he married his sweetheart, Jenny McKinley. But I don't think that the ink was dry on the marriage license before Billy had signed up as a wagon master. And he started bringing wagon trains from Mississippi to Texas. And Billy loved Texas. Oh, he loved Texas. And he didn't stay home one bit with his new wife. And before long, they did have a baby boy. And in about 2 years, Billy brought his new wife, Jenny, and the baby boy to Texas. And they had 2 girls. One of them was Patty, my great-grandmother, who helped raise my father. But Billy still had the wanderlust, and he didn't stay home even after the family was in Texas. He did buy some property somewhere down near San Felipe, and he kept on bringing the wagon trains from Mississippi to Texas. In 1877, at the age of 35, Billy died. And his story, well, we lose his story there because nobody really knows where he died or how he died. But the family lore says that Billy Bishop, Lieutenant in the Civil War, wagon train master and father and husband is buried in an unmarked grave somewhere along the Brazos. Wait for the wagon, wait for the wagon, wait for the wagon, and we'll all take a ride. Wait for the wagon, wait for the wagon, wait for the wagon, and we'll all take a ride.
Ah, that was so wonderful. Just to know that that history lives in you, that is fabulous. I have so many questions now about that letter you're so fortunate to have.
I have another one too, that he wrote when he was in the Confederate Navy. I didn't even know there was a Confederate Navy, but he was in it for a while. He didn't like it,
That
but
is
he was
so-
off the coast of Pensacola, Florida in that book.
Oh, that is marvelous. Well, as all of you out there can already tell, she, along with Mary Grace, are fantastic storytellers. And Mary Grace had just finished also a story about a true person, John Henry Falk. And I do want you to know that both Mary Grace Kettner and Marianne Blue are also recipients of this prestigious award. And now you know why. So how about a big hand for us? Okay, our next storyteller is also a SASA board member. She lives right here in San Antonio, but she also has a second home, and her second home is in Apple, Ireland, because that's actually where she came from, along the way of Germany. And you can only imagine the tales that she has. I don't know what she's going to share with us tonight, but she is one busy gal, and we're just so excited that she's here to share her story with us. This is Jane McDaniel. Jane, you have the stage. Let's see.
Well, ad hoc story because Mark, whoops, days.
No,
That was my front. No, that's better. This story because Mark likes it. And you all have heard it like 3 times, but it's a great story.
yes.
I'm from Limerick City. Limerick is on the river Shannon. And the Shannon is the longest river in England and Ireland. It sits on a long, 60-mile long estuary. And in the estuary that goes to the sea, which is tidal, there are a number of islands, small islands, all with strange names. One is called Dragon's Head because it's shaped like a dragon's head. And in 1803, there was a fear going around Europe that Napoleon would come up the west coast and would take over all the countries that he would go through. And he had been quite successful up to then. It was before he tried going to Russia. So they built along the coast of Ireland and the southern coast of England, they built batteries, which were round towers as lookouts for Napoleon. And a group of men who had originally been fishermen, because in Ireland, a lot of the fishermen have another job, they were building this battery on Dragonhead Island. And to get to it across the muddy flats of the estuary, they built a road out of rocks, which was about 4 feet higher than the sea, or 3 feet higher than the muddy bottom. And they would go back and forth with their carts, with the horse drawn by horses, and take the rocks over and build this battery. So one day it was the evening and they were finished working. And the last man, laborer, to go across, loaded up his cart and got the horse going and started across. Now that horse did not like that pathway. It was uneven. So he slipped on the side, and all of a sudden the horse was in the water, in the mud, and he was going panicking. And the man got off the cart and got down into the water and tried to get the horse back up, and the horse was really out of it. He finally got him up But the horse was pointed in the wrong way. He was pointed back towards the island, and the tide was coming in. So he took the horse and the cart back to the island to think. Stood on the island and thought, I've got to get across. So he tried again, pointed the horse around and started to go across the pathway. And the horse wasn't happy. It wasn't happy, and it was getting very, very, very deep. And the man was up in his water up to his chest and then up to his neck. And no Irish fisherman knows how to swim. There's a reason for that. There's a reason for that, because the Irish, being realists that they are, although we are famed to telling lots of high class stories, but Irish fishermen don't learn how to swim because they say it takes you half an hour to die in the Atlantic if you can swim, but only 5 minutes if you can't. So they don't learn. So he was up to his neck in water and he thought, I have no choice. So around he went back again with the horse, and the horse was very happy to be back on dry land again. That horse was not happy. So he thought, well, I can't go across that pathway, not now, where the water is covering it, 3.5 feet of high water, and who knows, it's only a half a mile across to the mainland, but that horse is not going to go. So he thought he'll walk around the island and see if he could find somebody to give him a hand. So he ran around the island, and of course there was nobody living on the island, it was just all trees. And he went back to where he had left the horse, and the horse was gone. And the cart was overturned, and the horse had gone. Well, he stood there for a while, and then he heard a strange noise. It was the noise of a child, a small child crying. And he looked around, where is the child here? There's nobody living on this island. And there on the cart was a small naked baby lying on the back of the cart. And his first attention was, of course, for the child. He took off his jacket and wrapped the child in it. But his jacket was all wet from being in the water. So he thought, well, I got to take care of this child. It was screaming and bawling as loud as it could. Gradually got less and less. So he took the child and he ran around the island looking for somewhere. And he thought, well, the battery, maybe there's dry wood in there. I can make a fire and I can stay there overnight and we'll both be warm and the child won't die on me because this is a small child and he can't stand the cold. And he got to the battery and there was not a stick of dry wood. So he went back to where he'd left the cart, and he thought, I can't do this. This child's not going to last the night. And this man was a widower, so there was nobody waiting at home for him to get home. So he didn't have that worry. And then he thought, there's got to be a boat somewhere on the island. People come and go here. So he went back to the battery with the child, and the child was now very quiet. Its cries were very faint. And behind the battery, he heard a sound that he was very familiar with. It was the sound of a wooden boat banging up against rocks. He knew that sound. So he went around the back, and there was a small rowing boat. And he undid the painter, the rope that was tying it up, put the child in the boat, and got the oars out and started rowing. And he was rowing and rowing to get across half a mile to the mainland. And he didn't notice at first that there was somebody in the boat. And it was a red-headed woman looking at him, looked him straight in the eye. And he recognized him, this woman, as his wife, who had drowned in the sea a year before. He had taken her with him and his other fishermen on the boat that had gone out to sea to fish. And he looked at her, but she had drowned. And she looked him straight in the eye and she said, why? Why did you kill me? Why did you murder me last year? Why did you push me over the side of the boat? And he said, I had no choice. The other said that the storm came up and the other said it was your fault. It was your fault that I'd taken a woman on the boat, and a red-headed woman to it. She said, you didn't have to do that. He said, I had to do it. I had to save us all. She said, you could have saved me. He said, but we all lived. And he looked down at the child in the bottom of the boat. And he had horror in his face, horror and fear. And all he could do was row and sob and sob. at his wife that he had thrown over the side last year. And then he saw somebody sitting in the front of the boat. He was rowing. You know, when you row backwards. Your back is to the direction that you're going. And this person was sitting in the very front of the boat, and it was a man, not your usual man. And the man looked at him and said, "I'm your retribution. I've come here, you have to pay for what you did last year." And the fisherman turned laborer cried and cried his eyes out and said, "I didn't do it on purpose. I didn't do it on purpose. I know I'm a murderer, but I had to save all of us." And the man who was not a man said to him, "Live with it. Live with the fact that you're a murderer. And that child, throw the child over the edge. That child is the cause of all your trouble anyway. Throw the child over the edge." He said, "I can't do that." "But you are a murderer. Live with that." "No, I can't." And he looked at the child and he looked at the man and he said, "You've come from the other world, haven't you? Take retribution from me." And the man said nothing. He just looked at him and he knew that he had come from the many-colored land. And he took off his jacket again and he wrapped the child in it. And he stood on the edge of the boat and he jumped into the estuary and sank like a stone into the dark, dark depths of Shannon estuary. That's my story.
I don't know about you all, but I just got goosebumps.
Oh, that's good.
That was amazing. And like I was telling you all before, Jane has another home. You know, her other home is a beautiful island of Ackle. I only know that because she has a Facebook page with her beautiful house, and she actually welcomes folks to come stay in it. So please get in touch with Jane McDaniel on Facebook. There we go. All right. Now, oh, and I see Rick. Rick, I'm so glad you joined us. Rick, you're one of our Zoomers, and of course, we're practicing with this. Are you interested in sharing a tale tonight? Okay. It's so nice to have Rick Davis with us. He is actually the president or president-elect of TSA, the Tejas Storytelling Association. So it's so wonderful to have him. And while he's here, I do want to let everyone know that I do believe Karen posted this, but we will be having a wonderful workshop this Saturday with Carolina Quiroga Stoltz. She is a fabulous storyteller who we actually got to enjoy. She became a friend to all of us for about 2, maybe 3 years here, and then she's moved on with her husband. And she has been storytelling all over the United States, on national, and I believe even internationally. And she is just so wonderful. She's like a shapeshifter with her facial expressions, her words, her sounds that come out of her mouth. And the workshop is going to be on just that. It is free, and we would love for you to join us. You will have to be a member of Tejas just to get that link, but you can also email me at sue.kuntz@gmail.com, and I will send you the link also. So we'd love to have each and every one of you. And those of you who are here, we actually have the little poster right over there. And we'd love for y'all to join us. It's going to be Saturday on Zoom. It'll begin at 10 o'clock in the morning, Central Standard Time, and it will end at 12. So it'll be a 2-hour filled with magic, total magic. And we'd like to thank Tejas Storytelling Association and SASA, because we are both having her come and do this. She's in the midst of moving to Asheville, North Carolina, as I speak. She's probably in the car with all her stuff. So without further ado, I'm wondering if Veronica may have a tale to share. Would you like to? Yes. So I did not put her on the spot, but I did ask her if she might want to share a tale. Veronica Gard is also a SASA member and board member, and she's been with us pretty much as long as we've been around, and we are over 30 years old, by the way. A lot of San Antonians do not know that, but there you are. So we need to spread the word and get some more folks as part of our group.
Go SASA. Go
Yeah.
SASA.
So there's Veronica. Veronica, you are on stage.
Thank you. This is a story that I rarely tell personal stories. I really enjoy telling fairy stories and, you know, all those sort of legends and things like that. But this, just recently, I have been very concerned, as I'm sure all of you are, at the way the country is handling the subject of books. We're having people ask us to go through our books and throw books away and not allow children to read books, and withdrawing books from libraries, and librarians are being threatened. I find this completely unacceptable myself. And I just can't understand quite what's going on. And I found myself thinking very hard about librarians, and we have them here in our midst. I know Sue was a librarian, and probably still is, in fact. I had a librarian in my life, as I'm sure many of us did. She was a red-headed, tall woman, and she lived in, as far as I knew, she lived in the children's library, which was just down the street. I was brought up on Arkwright Road in London, which comes between Finchley Road, and it goes all the way up to Fitzjohn's Avenue in Hampstead in London. And just as a side story, I took a friend there once about maybe 10, 15 years ago, and I said, it's a very, very high hill, and I lived quite a long way up. I'm afraid it's quite a walk. And when we got there, of course, it was nothing. But I remembered it as a child, and it was a long way up from Finchley Road to my house. But really, it wasn't at all. But I was lucky because I could run down the hill to the library. And Children's Library was the outer part of the Hampstead library itself. And Miss Blandford, her name was, I'll never forget her. Miss Blandford lived there, and she looked after me as if I was her own, really. I would go in and she would say, welcome me, and she'd say, what have you got? And I'd have a pile of books, and we'd change the books. And then as I got a bit older, I was about 8 or 9 at this time, she taught me how to stamp the books, because in those days you stamped the books and you had a little card which went into your ticket, and she taught me all about that. So I became a little junior librarian, and she taught me how to do the books in the, we had long shell drawers full of cards with all the books in them. You all remember those. Well, I looked after that, and I put them in, and I became very self-important. Of course, I owned library. I was Miss Librarian, and what she did though was to encourage somebody who was at the time quite lonely, because I was the youngest. My brother was 6.5 years older than I was, and away at school all the time, and I had a lot of carers, I can't remember who they were, but I didn't like them very much, sort of nannies, people like that. So the library was my place to go, my place to be happy in. And she taught me so much about how to look after books, for one thing, where to put them, how to shelve them. And looking back, I realized that in fact, everything that I have done since then stems from that very, very early time, when somebody took interest in a little girl who was, quite on her own, really, quite lonely about things. And because of her care and her thoughtfulness and the way she looked after me, I became an English teacher, and later on a storyteller. And I look
back and think, well, most of that, in fact, pretty much all of that originated at the time when I was a little girl going down the hill to the library. So I want to say to all librarians, you are wonderful, wonderful people. You do incredible work. And children, especially, children remember you, will remember you for always. Certainly I do. And I just wanted to remember Miss Blanford.
Oh, man.
Thank you so much, Veronica. I'm gonna make my way. Here we go. Hey, now I get to see everyone here. Yes. So this is our very first hybrid session, and I think it's a huge success. So we thank everyone online and everyone who is live here. It was so wonderful to give hugs to everybody. I have a story. It actually comes from England, possibly Wales. Somehow I moved it, I believe, over here to America somewhere, which is pretty cool to do when it comes to folktales and the empowerment of being a storyteller. So here we go. Long, long time ago, probably before my great-grandparents were even alive, there was a woman, Maggie May, who was older than the hills. Even the kids that grew up knowing her said that she was old when they were grown up. Be that as it may, Maggie May, as old as she is at this point in time, she still would wake up each and every morning and she would get herself dressed and she would find her way to whatever chores needed to be done pretty much around the farm, helping any of the wives that might need any kind of chores run. And with that, she was paid meagerly, but she was happy to receive a plate of meat at times, or a plate of cheese, or a drink of tea. What else could she want? And there came one evening when she was walking home from a full day of doing her chores. The sun was going down, but as she was walking along the dirt street, she saw something in her peripheral, and as she looked, she said, a black pot. And she looked left and she looked right just to see if maybe someone had accidentally dropped it, or possibly someone on their horse or donkey, it fell off. There it was, a perfect pot, she thought. A pot that I could cook something in, possibly some grains or what might be given to me a few days from now. It could be mine. But certainly she thought, it probably has holes in it. But holes in this black pot would be perfect for me to put whatever soil I have at home and plant some of my weedy flowers that are so pretty right now in the spring. Yes, that's probably exactly what's part of this pot. It will be mine. And she walked over and she took the lid off this black pot, and oh my almighty glory, what should be in that pot? Not empty and not 3 holes, but filled, I tell you, with gold coins all the way to the brim. And she thought what luck she had. Never, ever had she even seen one coin this close up. Now, while looking at this, her brain's already going crazy, as I think yours would be too, like winning the lottery. And she just started skipping around. Yes, I told you, skipping around as old as she was. And she was singing about all the wonderful things she'd have. Why, it might have been something like this. I'm gonna buy me a golden dress. I'm gonna buy me a golden ring. I'm gonna buy me some golden shoes. Skip to my loo, my darling. Oh, she was skipping around until she realized, I gotta get this home. My back ain't what it used to be. Well, she untied that scarf of hers and she worked it around her waist, tied a knot, and took what other end she had and tied it around the handle of that black pot. Well, she started walking like she was pushing a wagon and dragging that big old black pot behind her, and it got pretty heavy. But she was good with that, thinking about all the wonderful things she was going to do with those gold coins, and they were all good, kind things, of course. Maybe not all, but she was as happy as can be. But eventually that sweat was getting a little too much for her. So she stopped and she just turned around to make sure that pot was still there. And holy moly, glory, that pot was no longer a black pot filled with gold coins. She rubbed her eyes and she said, my eyes must have been playing tricks on me. Was she upset? She was confused, but not upset, for what she saw now was a huge lump of silver. Silver. Now, her shawl was still wrapped around it. She thought, yes, silver's much better for me. Of course it is. Everyone would be snooping around my house, wanting me to be giving out those gold coins, which I would do. But this is so much easier. And silver, oh, it glitters and it makes even my appearance look good. It takes those wrinkles away from my face. Yes, she thought, I would love to have this lump of silver. And she continued to trudge on, and boy, did she trudge. That silver was maybe not as heavy as a gold, but it was heavy, and she was old. And eventually she stopped again. Now, she was happy that that sun had set, because that silver, boy, it would have been shining in that sun, and the moon was just coming up. And when she turned around, she was a little worried about that moon and reflection on that silver and everybody coming around to figure out what it all was. She looked and holy moly, Moses, you know, there was no lump of silver. There was a huge lump of iron. But iron, it was black, and that moon was not reflecting on that black, thank goodness. Oh, what a relief, she thought. I'm not going to have to worry about that silver glistening in the moon. Oh boy, that was going to be rough, me trying to explain what's going on anyways. And now I've got this huge lump of iron. Oh, iron. Everyone needs and wants iron. Oh, and to have an iron gate and an iron fence, I'm sure it's worth enough money for me to have that around my small cottage. Yes, this is so worth me dragging it all the way home. Sure enough, she continued on trudging until she almost got to her small little cottage. She's just going to turn around and just kind of sit on that. And when she turned around, oh my goodness, she was popcorn in the pan excited for no big old clump of iron anymore. No siree, Bob. Right there in front of her was a huge rock, a small boulder. Perfect, she said. One that she wanted for so long. She wanted it to fit right in front of her door. When her door was open, she needed something as a doorstop, and this would have been perfect. And it is perfect. Well, she was just over the moon excited. She sat down on this rock just to count her blessings, when all of a sudden she realized, well, I'm here. And she moved it over with the help of her shawl right to where her front door was. And she untied that shawl. And she was getting ready just to admire it. But as she put her arms out, oh my gosh, that heavy rock, that boulder, why, it started to hopping and popping around, and hooves started popping out of this. I know, and a long neck and ears, and then it was bucking. Oh, she said, I can't believe my luck. and there's no one else around to see the Hadley cow. Now, if you've never heard of that, why, they must have made themselves come on over on the ships over here to America, for they're these mischievous, shape-shifting elves. And there he was, just trying to pull my own leg and just bucking away, and his teeth were showing, and he was laughing away at Maggie May. And Maggie just waved right back to it and thought, what luck. I'm the only one that got to see the magic happen tonight. And she sat down with a cup of tea, and she sat down with a little plate of meat that was given to her. And she thought of the stories she was going to tell on her chores the next morning. Why, one of those tales is the tale I just told you right now. Thank you very much. Is there anyone out here who would like to share a story? Mr. Storytellers. Nobody. Yes, sir. Come on up. Yes.
Yeah.
I'll make myself back over here.
That's a story in itself.
Okay.
Well, it's not gonna be as long as all yours,
Oh, of course not.
but, I'm happy to be here today. This is great.
Can you introduce yourself to us,
Yes.
Ken?
Oh, should I stand back?
There you
Okay.
go.
Hi, everybody. I'm Gary Tall. Okay, and I live in San Antonio, and I've been in Toastmasters before, and I've done some stand-up comedy. So I thought I'd try some storytelling. So when I was 25, and I'm 65 now, I was still living at home and really didn't have an out, didn't have a way out. I was working and everything and going to college, I think. But a friend of mine, a guy named Howard, he had bought a condo in Simi Valley, California. That's where I used to live, in California. And this was his first purchase. He's the same age as me. He was born one day before me, on March 11, and I was born March 12, 1958. And he and I met in junior high. We sat next to each other in junior high, and we've been friends ever since, believe it or not. So Howard bought this condo, and he didn't have a chance to live there by himself. He invited me to pretty much move in around the same time as him. Now, he worked day shift, and I worked night shift. So our paths really didn't cross very much. But he liked to communicate with notes, telling me what I did wrong each day. So there was a note saying, you left a fork in the sink. Okay, a fork in the sink. Anyone could do that, right? Then the next day, maybe it was like that you left the blinds open before you left for work. I really prefer that you close the blinds. All right, I'm thinking I got to do a little bit of follow up here and make sure I'm putting my forks away and I'm closing the blinds. Then he had this glass table that we used to eat at. And one day there was a note when I got home, but not only was there a note, but there was a roll of paper towels and there was a bottle of 409 or Windex, whatever it was, and he said, clean the blankety blank table. He was not pulling punches. So I cleaned the table, made sure it was really spotless. Then a few days later, and I don't really remember the time frames of this, but the coup de grace, as you call it, I come home and there's a note saying, why do you leave the toilet paper hanging down so low from down the wall? And I'm thinking, what is going on with this guy? The toilet paper? Oh, I mean, it wasn't a matter of under or over, it was a matter of how low it hung. So I wanted to get back. And I had a great idea. So I took a felt marker and I went in the bathroom and I drew a little line just underneath where the toilet paper roll is. I hung a sign saying, no toilet paper beyond this point. And I soon moved out. I got my own place, but the moral of the story is, don't get a room with someone who owns the place. Be on equal terms so that you can fight back, you know?
Yeah.
Well, thank you very much.
That was fabulous. Oh, my goodness. All right. Oh, I see Jamie. Okay. So I'm so glad to see everyone here. Jamie Blunt is actually on Zoom. And so as I say this, I would love for all of our audience members, this is the first time we'll have a teller on Zoom, to go ahead and look at the screen. And I will introduce Jamie. Jamie is actually not living here in Texas anymore, but he is a SASA member. And he is living in North Carolina, correct? Yes. So without further ado, I'm going to give you over to Jamie. How about a hand for Jamie?
Okay. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Good. Okay, thank you. Let me ask you a question. Let's imagine you're driving your car up I-35, heading in a northerly direction, and you're maybe at about, maybe De Zavala and 35, and you see a guy with a sign, a hand-printed sign that reads Waco. Would you pick up that guy? Probably not. Well, would you laugh at that guy? Like, that guy wants to hitchhike from here to Waco? Is he crazy? Well, I think that's what bubbled into many people's minds when they saw me. But I wasn't going to Waco. I was in Norway. I had just gotten out of college and I wasn't about to enter the cold, cruel world of business and commerce and everything. So I decided to take a little vacation. On a very limited budget, mind you. So I started out in Norway. And one morning I was heading away from Oslo, the capital, to a city called Bergen on the west coast of Norway, a very beautiful city. And I had this sign that I had in front of me on a manila folder that read Bergen, B-E-R-G-E-N. I think Bergen's about as far away from Oslo as San Antonio is from Waco. So can you imagine what happened? Yeah, people laughed at me. And I thought, what is so funny about a guy holding a sign up on the road like this? I'll try it some more. I'll try it some more. And again, I got these laughs, people to just throw their heads back and laugh at me when they saw that sign. I thought to myself, well, you know, I guess I'm on the wrong road. I don't live here. I'm not from here. I'm probably on the wrong road going in the wrong direction. So I walked about 100 yards over to a gas station. I think it was an Esso station. And I said to a guy working there, I said to him, is this the way you get to Bergen? I want to go to Bergen. And is that, he said, yeah, that's the way to go. Yeah. So I thought, well, I'm on the right road. So I don't know what's going on. So anyway, there was a customer in the gas station behind me in line who said, I'm going to Bergen. You can ride with me if you'd like. I said, yeah, I'd love it. You're going to take me to Bergen? Yeah. Thanks. I'd love to. That'd be great. So I hopped into his car and threw my backpack in the trunk of his car and off we rode to Bergen. It's a long journey. I guess I got picked up at about 9 o'clock that morning. We didn't get to his house in Bergen until after dark that night. But we had a wonderful time together. I never met this guy. He never met me. But he took me on some places along the way that were touristic, that were very beautiful. I took some pictures. And we saw some fjords, took a ferry boat across a fjord. And turns out we had a lot in common. He was quite a bit older than I, but still we had a lot of fun together. So we got into Bergen. He said, where are you going to spend the night? I said, well, I guess I'll go to a youth hostel in Bergen. Oh, you'll never get into the youth hostel. They're closed by now. You can stay at my place if you'd like. I said, well, sure, that'd be great. If you have room, yeah, I've got room for you, sure. So he pulled into his driveway and he took me into his house and put me in the guest room. And anyway, I slept very soundly that night. I couldn't believe I made it in one day. It was a pretty long distance. We saw a lot of mountains and fjords and beautiful, beautiful ride. So I felt sort of indebted to this guy. His name was Rolf, R-O-L-F, which translates to Ralph in English. And I said, I feel kind of indebted to you. You saved me a lot of time and a lot of money by picking me up and letting me stay at your place. I'd like to take you out to breakfast this morning. So we went downtown and had breakfast together. And we said goodbye. I checked into the youth hostel, which wasn't far away. And he went to work. He had his own business and he had to go to work and take care of it. So I bummed around Bergen that day. And then the next day I got back on the road and hitchhiked back to Oslo and stayed at a youth hostel in Oslo. I got there at a very reasonable time. And that evening I was walking down the street in Oslo and this man, this bum, I guess, derelict, hobo, if you will, walked up to me and spoke to me in English and said, could I have some money? I said, okay, if I give you some money, will the face of good fortune smile upon me tomorrow? And those are the exact words that I used. Mind you, he was speaking English as a second language, and he was a hobo, a bum, a derelict, if you will. And he said, oh, yes, I guarantee it. I guarantee the face of good fortune will smile upon you tomorrow. So I gave him some money. I thought, yeah, he'll probably go out and buy a bottle of booze, and that'll be the end of the money. Well, the next day I got back on the highway. I wanted to go to Stockholm, and I got picked up by these two guys driving a Volkswagen Beetle. They were from Sweden, from Stockholm. And they said they'd take me to Stockholm. Well, from Oslo to Stockholm is a pretty good hike. Not quite as far away as from Oslo to Bergen, but it's a pretty good hike. And I made it there in one ride with these guys in their Volkswagen Beetle. Mind you, they were very opportunistic and very, very liberated, if you will. And they smoked marijuana virtually all the way, offered me some. I said, thank you, I don't care for any. I'm probably going to wreck this car, smoking marijuana and driving like that. And so then we came to a checkpoint at the border between Sweden and Norway. Had to get out of the car, had to take our luggage out of the car. And the police went through my backpack with a fine-tooth comb, everything they could. My shaving kit, my clothing, my shoes, everything, to see if there was anything there that I shouldn't have. And they also went through the belongings of the guys that picked me up. And I just knew in my heart of hearts they were going to find some marijuana or some other dangerous controlled substance, and we'd all get hauled off to jail. So when they were going through their bags and my bag, I held my breath. I was scared to death. Well, anyway, the police said goodbye, good luck, and we left. After we were on the car headed down the road, I said to those guys, I was scared to death they were going to find your marijuana in your bags and we could all get arrested. Oh, no. We hid that in a very special place. We knew they would be looking for it. So we hid it in a place we knew they'd never find it. Well, okay. No. Anyway, we got to Stockholm. And this one guy who owned the car lived in a very beautiful house, just as nice a house as you'd find in any suburb here in the USA. So I spent the night at his house. And next day we went downtown to Stockholm. I saw Stockholm, which, by the way, is a very beautiful city. I hope you go there someday. It's a city which sits on 14 different islands. And holm in Swedish means island, and stock means fort, garrison, fortress, if you will. So originally it was a fortress on a group of islands, on an archipelago, if you will. So I did the town, came back, and then that night, the fellow who was my host had some people over, and they smoked their marijuana and drank their wine and had a party. And next day I took off and headed south down to the continent, down to Denmark. I went from Denmark by train into Germany, France, Spain, Portugal, Italy, Austria. And then I went to England from there. All told, I was away about 8 weeks. I had a wonderful time. Again, I didn't have a lot of money to spend. I had a Euro pass. I got a youth Euro pass, and I got a youth airplane ticket. So between those two, I had a little bit of money left over. But I found myself eating food out of supermarkets and eating a lot of hot dogs and things like that. But I made it okay. It was fun. And now for the rest of the story. My friend Rolf, who, by the way, is a physical therapist, came to Washington, D.C. to give a speech to a group of fellow physical therapists. Now, mind you, I hitchhiked with him in 1972. It was about 1994, 1995, that he came to Washington to deliver his speech to this group of physical therapists in Washington, D.C. So I volunteered to go down and pick him up at the hotel where he was staying and drive him back to Baltimore and show him Baltimore. And I hadn't seen Rolf in over 20 years. You know? When I saw him outside the hotel, I said, "Rolf?" He said, "Jamie?" I said, yeah, come on. So, of course, he had changed a lot. Not me. I hadn't changed at all, of course. You know, I was just as youthful as ever. So anyway, I took him to Baltimore and showed him around the town. And I said, "Today's Sunday. I typically go to church on Sunday. Would you like to go to church?" He said, yeah, I'd like to go. I'd like to go to church. I said, "Well, you know, I know you don't normally go to church, but no, I'd like to go to church. Really, I'd like to go to church with you. That'd be fine." So I took him to my church downtown. And after church, we all went to a coffee shop and sat down and drank coffee. And then I said to Rolf later in the day, I said, "Rolf, of all the things we've done together today, what did you enjoy the most?" He said, "I enjoyed going to church more than anything else. I don't go to church in Norway ever, but I really like going to church with you. You belong to a very nice church." And I said, "Well, thank you, Rolf. That's very nice of you. Very nice of you indeed." So anyway, that's pretty much what happened between Rolf and me. We still keep up. I saw him once again a few years ago in Norway, stayed at his place, got to meet his wife this time. And anyway, I hope to see him again sometime. So anyway, my adventures with Rolf, summer of 1972.
Bravo.
We didn't find out what the special place where the marijuana was hidden.
Yeah, so we don't know where that marijuana was hidden, huh?
No, and I didn't want to know.
And you're a better man.
All right, yeah.
So, Jamie, how did it sound having real live clapping in the background? Could you hear us?
Yes, I heard you and I saw you. Yes.
Fantastic. All right. Well, I believe that is the end of our storytelling, and actually perfect timing. It's 7:56. I do want to remind all the folks that are here that to please sign this form right here. If you would like me to send that link for Saturday, your email is very much necessary. So feel free to do that. Make sure I can get you that link if you haven't already gotten it for the Saturday workshop with Carolina. And we are elated. This went pretty well. It can only get better. So again, thanks for Karen and Chuck and everyone else who's here. Very much, very supportive. And it was so wonderful to hear real voices and clapping. And I will post the pictures on our Facebook page. We do have a web page also. I suspect Karen put all that into the chat, and you guys can save the chat if you would like to.
Report.
And tell me.
And put a report on the website.
Oh, yes. Jane is here. Jane is a fabulous writer herself, other than being a storyteller also, but Jane actually writes out a summary of all the tales that are, and boy, does a fantastic job. So that will also go on Facebook and our website. So we're elated. So thank you all so much for being here, and thank all of you so much.